Our panel this afternoon, Public Art, Forms, Meaning, Purposes. My name is Carol Yinghua Lu. I'm the director of Beijing Inside Out Art Museum. I would like to start by introducing our distinguished panelists this afternoon according to an alphabetical order of their names. I'm joined by Daniel Baumann, director of Kunsthalle Zurich, who's sitting in the middle. Christoph Doswald, director of KIO, which means Art in Public Spaces, City of Zurich. On my right-hand side is Philip Tinari, director and CEO of UCCA. We also have with us Claire Shea, Deputy Director of Part:In Hong Kong, and Liu Wei, Beijing-based artist. The format that we will take this afternoon is more of a conversation. But in order for the conversation to be more specific, I would like to ask each of the speakers to talk about their perception and experiences of public art through their own ways of working with projects in the nature of public art. Public art, as we know it, is a particular form of art that is made with the intention of being staged in the physical public domain, usually accessible to all. It involves a working practice of site specificity, community involvement, collaboration, and particularly the relationship between the content and the audience. Just to give a bit of context for the talk, in China, public art has had a very particular trajectory since 1949, as public space is and has been extremely regulated and politicized. Since the very beginning, public monuments and sculptures were all state commission projects and carry particular ideological messages. There was a short window of relaxation in the beginning of the 1980s with the rise of wall paintings in public spaces such as airports, train stations. But in essence, these are projects carried out with heavy-handed political agendas. Then in the beginning of the 1990s, with a new wave of economic development and globalization, there were public projects carried out by contemporary artists. Yet this short space and this free space was extremely limited and soon closed again. So I thought just to give a bit of historical background to the discussion of public art. But from now on, I would like to turn the floor to my panelists and to ask, perhaps start with Daniel, can give us a bit of an introduction in terms of his experience of working with public art.
So I would need the images. Okay, I brought a few images to very shortly summarize the way I think, or I was influenced about the whole question of art in public space. So what you see here is Bus Shelter by the American artist Dennis Adam, and it was shown in an exhibition in 1987 in Münster. It was a so-called Skulpturenprojekte, the projects of sculptures in Münster, and it totally changed the way we, or at least me and my colleagues, thought about public art. I'll show you another image, Isa Gensken, a kind of a proto-strange architecture. And so before that, public art, you know, in Europe it was mainly kings. I have to see, okay, they took away a few pictures, it's okay, I'll handle it. So basically public art in Europe, it was kings or nobility on a pedestal in the middle of a square, and you had to admire, right? Or it was the king you had to admire, or it was religion you had to admire. That's very roughly said the situation. Then came, bourgeois society in the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, and the kings Jesus. The religion was replaced by artists like Beethoven. You would have monuments to Beethoven. And this, after the war, was replaced by abstract art. Let's say Alexander Calder, all over France, you find in every other village or city in France, you find abstract sculptures. So that was the moment of, at the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s. And Skulpturprojekt Münster really switched the whole idea. So basically it was saying, instead of doing a monument, we better plant a tree. Or we better make these stairs bigger so people are more comfortable. We build, as you can see here, we build a bus shelter instead of building a sculpture. So that changed our whole thinking. And I'm still influenced by this. And the next step then, which really influenced me, and then I've said what I wanted to say, is playgrounds. So I almost think maybe instead of doing public art, people or artists should do playgrounds. So that was, okay, that's a mix. Okay, I'll move on. Think some mix up. Okay, here we go. So I think, you know, the playground is an interesting space in this city. The city is cities have become extremely expensive. So where can kids go? And also dangerous. And also the parents are observing their kids constantly. And I think spaces like playgrounds are complex spaces. You have question of education, you have question of architecture, of art, of culture, of risk-taking. So these places have been underused or underestimated. And I think one of the things one could invest into in terms of the idea of public art or art in public space is building playgrounds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel, for giving us a lot to think about in terms of the evolution of what could public art be and what could its relationship be with the public. We would like to now move to Christoph Doswald. Could you give us a bit of your kind of expanded introduction in terms of your experience of working with public art?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a brief introduction of what we do here in Zurich. Daniel just gave us the keywords we work with. Context is very important, and we had always public art. Public art happened all the time, as you pointed out, with monuments and everything. It happened unsystematically. What we do since 2006, we established a systematic program trying to deal with the very regulated space, the very limited space, and also with the limited money we have. So we want to really bring it together in one platform. We want to communicate. We want to also make the people able to understand what art is, because public art is not protected from a, let's say, white cube. It is completely exposed. It is vulnerable, sort of, and we found that public art needs some advocates, some mediators, some, let's say, people who support it. Not only art historians or curators, but people from the city, from the population. So that's why we started the whole program in 2006. We have a commission working on that. We have juries, we have experts, but we have also many volunteers helping us to do that. I brought you a couple of projects in order to show what we do more concretely. This is a sculpture from Albanian artist Zizli Shafa. It's in a very let's say unsexy neighborhood, a little bit at the periphery of Zurich, in a co-op living area where people spend their time, and it is sort of a symbol for for the minority living there, and it's reflecting what they do, what they stand for. It gives them also, let's say, a route to their Albanian homeland where they came from. This is another project dealing with social involvement. You mentioned that, Carol, that it is very important to involve the population in that. It's Baltensberger and Sieper, that's a young Swiss artist couple who started a process with the population in order to collect aluminium, and from that collected aluminium they have been producing a bell. And so on and so on. This is famous Swiss artist couple, Fischli Weiss. They were also part of Munster sculpture projects in '87, and that's the house from that exhibition of Kasper Koenig, and we were very happy and lucky and honored to be able to rebuild it permanently in Zurich, and that means also that we have sort of built the bridge between that '87 project and today with that important thing. But that's pretty much what I wanted to say, and I think we can discuss further on later.
Great. Thanks, Grace, for bringing out the idea of working in the public in terms of engaging, involving the community, but also emphasizing on the kind of role of public art in terms of reaching out and educating the public. Now I would like to move on to the artist, Liu Wei. Liu Wei, he had worked on a couple of occasions on projects outdoor, and I think this will be part of his introduction this afternoon.
对，今天我们谈的关于公共艺术的问题，但是在这儿我更就是我觉得我不得不转到一个关于就是艺术的公共性的问题开始谈起。其实我也做过一些户外的一些公共项目，但是我觉得今天我更愿意讲的是一个对，我要讲的是我的一个作品，它也是也经常会是在户外展出，不同的地点展出，但它不是一个固定的一个公共的一个项目。但是这个展览，本身这个作品做的时候，当时是一个关于公共空间的讨论和和一个制度的讨论。因为当时我所用的所有的材料都是在一个二手市场里买的，就是旧货市场。起初我认为这些东西都是一些材料之类的东西，但是后来发现这些东西并不是只是一些材料，它们真正的是还是用来作为临窗之类的使用。其实这些东西就是很早的时候是在80年代的时候是一个就是新的一些住房公共住宅二居室啊三居室这样的一些临窗。然后当时对于一些人来说，就是对于当时的人来说，这是一个新的生活，对于一个新的生活的一个想象。但是现在到了99年、2000年左右的时候，这些东西又被用作就是一些新的一些外来的到北京来打工的这些人群的一些他们的生活的一个新的一个就他们对于新的生活的一个向往，他们用这些东西来还建造他们的一个住所。因为当时我所处的地方就是我的工作室所处的地方，就是大概城乡结合部。其实那个对于我来说是一个非常非常现实，就是非常有意思的。他们都是所有的东西都是通过自己的方式来搭建，他们好像似乎是被隔绝在一个城市之外，但对我来说那就是一个最真实的对于我来说最真实的北京的一个场景。对于我来说，它的公共性在于就是说，它能把这个时间，那个时间，然后推移到这个时候，这是完全是一个生成的一个过程。然后它的不同的地点展出在里面，这个是在比较内花园里展出。 在不同的地点都会表示，就是反映出不同的感觉来，像一个移动的城市，一个不断生成的一个城市的感觉。在这里面就是在这个我见到的这个房子，它其实是一个有一点性格都没有的一个建筑，但里面就是一个被封闭的空间，也是有关于一个私人空间和公共空间的一个关系。然后里面是被封闭的，里面有风暴，有一些你看整个展览其实就是一个被封闭的展览，还有其他的作品也是一样，就是一个关于公共空间的开放性和公共性的一个讨论的一个。但我所关心的，我整个的艺术创作所关心的是城市，是一个城市，就是从某种意义上来，对于我来说，城市就是人类一个最伟大的一个创造和一个最伟大的一个公共作品。就是城市里的东西太多，包含的东西太多，无论它的整个的构造也好，从最早的比如说古希腊的那种城市的构造，它的公共性，关于身体，关于这些一个东西，到后来的这种。我就是公共性的，就是后来无论到后来的，包括宗教绘画的它的这种公共性，再到后来，比如静物画也好，人像画也好，我觉得这些艺术作品都是在不同的时代反映着当时的一个对于人那个社会的现象，也同时也是影响着公共，就是也是就是它也具有很大的公共性。
Right. Liu Wei's talk and introduction brings the idea of the city actually as a very critical site to the location, to the happening of public art. And one thing I think that stood out for me in his speech was also the idea of materiality and relocation, that by relocating certain materials from its original context to the context of a public domain, the work itself generates a certain connotation, and we will come back to that. Now I would like to ask Claire to talk about her experience of working in the public and with public work.
Hello. Just to give you some background, I joined Parasite in Hong Kong about 1.5 years ago, and prior to that I was at Cass Sculpture Foundation in the south of England. And so I joined Cass. I was really interested in their history of their relationship to the history of public space in England, as they had been one of the initiators of the Fourth Plinth project in Trafalgar Square. And the organization was really interested in sort of initiating new projects in public space alongside its activities in the countryside in the south of England. So in the countryside, we would commission sculptures for display there. But we also did a major project in the city for the Olympics, working on Exhibition Road, which was a newly pedestrianized road, and bringing together all the museums and councils within that area together to start a new exhibition platform. And we did a show of Tony Craig's work in 2012. And then this is an image from, this is an image from an exhibition we did in 2016 called The Beautiful Disorder, which was a commission of 18 large-scale works by artists from Greater China at Cass. And then in addition to that, I was involved in a project called Bull Tendencies, which was in the south of London. It was a disused car park that was basically converted into a summertime exhibition display of sculpture orchestra and performances, and that carries on to today. So this is an image of a work by Kim Young-ro from the 2011 edition, where she wrote this airplane wing that brings together cultural influences from Celtic culture in the South Pacific, and looking at the kind of the shortening of distances that has been created by technology today. And then this is an image from a project that we did. I was an associate curator on the 8th Shenzhen Sculpture Biennial in Shenzhen. So this is an image of, oops, out of order. I think I have a picture of it. Yeah. This is an image of a billboard by Grand Fury that we placed in the Shenzhen metro, which states "Kissing doesn't kill, green indifference do." You know, it's a project that was remade in 2014 for the Shenzhen Biennial. I think that's probably all I have. Yeah.
Thank you, Claire, for giving us very concrete examples to think about in terms of working in the public, in particular the project in Shenzhen, because I was also kind of involved somehow, and I knew how what the challenges of staging potentially kind of provocative works in public. But we will come back as well. Now, I would like to ask Phil to share with us his experience of working in public.
Thank you, Carol. I think one thing that's important not to forget is that different places have different ideas of what a public can be, and I think Liu Wei sort of alluded to this at the beginning of his comments. But this sort of notion of public art comes out of a very sort of post-Enlightenment democratic notion of independent subjects living in some kind of harmonious equilibrium in some kind of cosmopolitan center or other kinds of site specificity. And of course, in this particular context where we are, let's say, under the auspices of a kind of more monolithic sovereignty, the individual subject plays a different role in the daily life of a given environment. I use that to preface what I wanted to talk about, which is, we don't really, I haven't done much in terms of public art per se, but a lot of work over the last 8 years has been about trying to create a public for art. And I think that in China at this moment, institutions can play a really important role in how that happens. So not to go completely off the rails, but I just do want to give this very quick example of this building we're all sitting in right now, and this is kind of what it looked like until January, and then of course that's like where we are now. Just as a way of sort of talking about how we've, I think, expanded our definition of who this place is for, and I think vice versa, like sort of complementarily, how the evolution of the economy and of the kind of cultural sensibility here has expanded the size and certainly the depth of affinity that people in Beijing and in China, I think more generally, are starting to feel for art and for institutions and other kinds of spaces and places in which art can happen. So I most, when people think of UCCA public art, maybe what they think about is the 3 dinosaurs that used to be, at our entrance, which, after 8 years of hard efforts, I was finally able to relocate 50 meters to the west. They're still here. Our friends from the 798 Management Committee are very happy that the landmark remains, but I'm happy that, instead of being known as instead of speaking to the world through this sort of outdated symbol of made in China in cages and mass production and all that, we actually are now able to present something that resembles a public plaza. And I guess the point here is that there is what's interesting is kind of like the architectural vocabulary of public space. I had this really, one of those kind of life reconfiguring moments of revelation one time going to a symphony concert in Tianjin. Actually, the orchestra from my hometown, Philadelphia, was playing at one of these beautiful new theater complexes, sort of performing arts complexes built around an artificial lake in a new area of Tianjin. And you had the library and the museum and the concert hall and the opera house, sort of configured in the same way, the sort of archetypal model is, I don't know, the Capitoline Hill or more recently, like in the 60s, something like Lincoln Center. And I just remember this kind of very improvised scissor gate, the kinds you see at the entrances to different government organs or even residential communities, kind of automatically coming with a remote and folding across and kind of cutting off the entrance to this giant public piazza to anyone but the people sort of holding tickets for the concert itself, right? So just that's sort of the forms of what public space is supposed to look like. Another recent experience was being at the National Museum of China, where you have the largest museum atrium probably anywhere in the world, but actually a very prescribed path by sort of 1 meter high barriers of where in that big open space one can actually walk. So I guess all of this is just to say that there are different ways to try to configure and construe the space for the public in relation to art. And also that there will soon be trees out front as well, so there's a landscape design that's going to happen too. And as we were rethinking kind of what it meant to be an institution of contemporary art for what we like to think of as a global Beijing public, really high on that list was how do we present a kind of open, transparent face to the world. And so in the design that OMA did, one feature is this floor covering that is in this kind of algorithmically generated pixelated gradient that leads from white to black through 5 shades of gray, and that is meant actually to try and suck you in, to sort of like attract people to come across the threshold. It also blurs the boundary between the outside and the inside. And anyway, I just speak of that because it's sort of the one time in the last few years that I've had to have a really serious set of thoughts about how we present and how we attract and how we engage.
Thanks, Phil, for kind of bringing